from Sports Illustrated, the MMQB. Our friend Albert Breer is back on the program. Good to see you, Albert. How are you, sir?
I'm good. How are we doing, Rich?
I'm doing great, man. I don't know. It's so fun watching these college football games, right? I mean, that game last night was something. Come on.
Yeah,
that was not a reference to you. In all seriousness,
I was fine. I was, I had a couple rough days there after New Year's Eve. Thanks for your concern. And then I was fine. I was able to enjoy it last night. It was fun to watch.
I mean, seriously, these standalone games in the NFL and college football have been, for the most part, like games of the year. Got to watch it all the way down to the end. It's been pretty amazing. I guess let's start with the college world in relation to what we're seeing in the NFL. We're all are you thinking Fernando Mendoza, who plays tonight, is going to be the first overall pick? The Raiders are going to make him their next quarterback? You hearing that right now?
I think the Raiders will take a quarterback first overall. I think that there are two quarterbacks that are playing tonight that would be in the running. Now, I don't know for sure whether or not Dante Moore is even going to come out, right? Like, because there's obviously been quite a groundswell that Uncle Phil there up in Eugene could make it worth Dante Moore's while to spend another year there. I also know, and I don't follow this stuff as closely, obviously, as NFL, but it does seem like Oregon's at least had, their foot in the recruitment of some quarterbacks through the portal, which might indicate that they know something. So it'll be interesting to see the way that plays out. But the early indications I've gotten is that those two kids are both in the running for the first overall pick. It's way too early, as you know, Rich. Like, I make a million calls when it comes to this stuff, and I'm not close to knowing exactly how every NFL team views these two. But the early indications I've had are that both would have a shot at going first overall.
So this could be a quarterback matchup tonight in Atlanta. The first two names off the board in Pittsburgh next April is what you're saying.
I certainly think that's in play. Again, like you don't know. I mean, the difference between 1 and 10, 1 and 15, where a kid is drafted. A lot of times there can be circumstances that can be involved with that and everything else. And so, until I make all the phone calls I need to make ahead of the draft, and we're talking on April 15th, I don't know that I'd say I feel fully comfortable, because I don't think either of these guys are like generational. Like, the early indications I've gotten is like if you plug these guys into the 24 class, I don't know that either of them would be higher than the fourth quarterback taken.
Really? Wow.
That doesn't mean they can't go first overall, as we know.
Sure.
But like, I don't know that I don't think these two rise to the level of Trevor Lawrence, Andrew Luck. Absolutely, no question about it. Going first overall. I think we knew on Joe Burrow, right, at this point in the calendar in 2020.
Right.
I don't know that the NFL is that sure on either of these guys. Now, again, like, both these guys sort of came out of nowhere this year. So I think there is a process of catching up on them too. Like, where, with Trevor Lawrence, even if they hadn't studied him in depth yet, like they did have his freshman and sophomore years, where Dante Moore was a backup last year at Oregon, and Fernando Mendoza was a Cal. And so, like, I do think that there's a process of even NFL people catching up and truly studying them, which is a lot different than watching them on TV or doing a school call.
And then, of course, last night's quarterbacks, Carson Beck is out of eligibility, right, Albert? Like, he
has to be. I saw he was in the same recruiting class as
Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud and Anthony Richardson. That's how long he's been at it, man.
Right.
And two of those three guys are starting playoff games this weekend for their respective franchises.
Yeah, two of those three guys are coming up for their fifth-year option this year. Like, those teams have to make decisions on the fifth-year option.
Well, I guess if I'm not mistaken, while you were in the waiting room of our Zoom, Albert, I think Trinidad Chambliss was denied his sixth-year option. So
right.
What are I know, again, we haven't studied this yet, and I have reached out to some of my colleagues in the talent evaluation world watching Chambliss play the last 2 weeks, saying, wow, he's got some ability, but I guess he's going to be in the mix for next year too. He's been terrific. He's been
great. I mean, I honestly, like, even Rich, like those last two throws he made to give them a chance at the end,
Unreal.
to get them to I mean, what was it, from like the 25 to the Ole Miss 35 and 2 plays with 1 timeout?
Right.
You know, I thought that was really impressive to at least give Ole Miss like a fighting chance at, you know, at somebody going up and making a miracle play in the end zone, you know? So I think the kid's got moxie, that's for sure. I think we can say he's a winner. You know, he was a huge winner, you know, at Ferris State, which no one was paying. He wasn't even supposed to be the Ole Miss starter, you know? So like, I think the kid's got a lot going for him. I'd say he probably also has a good head on his shoulders, knowing like, hey, if I go back to Ole Miss, I could do a little bit more in the way of development. And, you know, so I think even like the intention to go back for a year is maybe a check mark for maturity for him. And I'll be interested to see what happens, you know. I think the biggest question, just looking at him play, is probably size. But as far as moxie, mobility, accuracy, you see those things, you know, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. But, you know, these last 2 games, he's been absolutely electric. No question about it.
Albert Breer here on the Rich Eisen Show. Let's move to the pro game, sir, in full. Jon-Eric Sullivan, the vice president of player personnel of the Green Bay Packers, is the name chosen by the new circle of trust of Stephen Ross's in Miami for the Dolphins' new general manager. How does that inform you about John Harbaugh potentially going there or not? There doesn't seem to be much of a connection there. It doesn't mean that Harbaugh's not coming, but it seems like they made a decision based on what they think is best for the organization as a whole, long-term, not about trying to get Harbaugh in the mix this hiring cycle. Albert, is that a fair reading of a tea leaf here? What do you think?
I would just go through like the timeline here. Now a couple of weeks ago, you know, I wrote that the one way I could see Mike McDaniel being let go would be if something changed on the coaching market and someone like Mike Tomlin or John Harbaugh became available. I don't need to take you through the connections between Stephen Ross and the Harbaugh family. That's well established, right? Like through Ross having his name on the business school at Michigan, and obviously Harbaugh's history at Michigan, like that relationship's there. Steve Ross made a very spirited run at Jim Harbaugh in 2011 when he was still at Stanford. Harbaugh chose to go to the Niners. And had even like quietly discussed the idea of pursuing John Harbaugh in 2019 when the Ravens were in a contract negotiation with Harbaugh. And obviously that one worked out where he stayed in Baltimore. But this is something that's been on Steve Ross's mind for some time. So then on Monday, they put out requests to 6 general manager candidates. All 6 of those, Jon-Eric Sullivan included, had some sort of connection to Mike McDaniel. Now, in Sullivan's case, it's that he worked for Matt LaFleur, who is one of Mike McDaniel's best friends, right? Like, so he has some familiarity with what Mike McDaniel was doing in Miami, all of that. So they put those 6 requests out Monday. On Tuesday, the Chargers get the request for Chad Alexander, who, of course, works with Jim Harbaugh in L.A. and was in Baltimore for over a decade with John Harbaugh. So I think that got everybody's attention when later in the day, Baltimore winds up pulling the plug on John Harbaugh. So I think it'd be foolish not to think that John Harbaugh's availability had some sort of effect on Miami's week. And the fact that they let go of Mike McDaniel on Thursday rather than on Monday or Tuesday. You know, that said, I think they also recognize that there's going to be competition for John Harbaugh out there. And they recognize that there's no assurance that they're going to wind up landing him. And because of the way the rules are, like, you can't have candidates in person until after the divisional round to satisfy the Rooney Rule. You have to have, and this is candidates who work for a team, right? So if it's somebody who doesn't work for a team, you can have them in now. But if they work for a team, you can't have them in until after the divisional round. And so you can't, like, unless you're really running around the Rooney Rule, you can't really hire anybody until after the divisional round. So a lot has to happen between now and then, you know? And so I think the Dolphins, you know, things changed in the way that they were looking at Mike McDaniel as the coaching market evolved, and Harbaugh is a part of that. And they see some more options out there for them. So, okay, like, we see better options than maybe we thought there were going to be a week ago. And so we feel better about going forward with that and going with a clean slate. Troy Aikman is part of this process, and Troy Aikman, I know, has preached to them alignment. Troy Aikman did really like Jon-Eric Sullivan for whatever it's worth. And, now I think they go in and John Harbaugh is 100% a part of their equation, but they know there's a chance they don't get him. And so we're going to go with the best general manager candidate. And I think for them, I think they like some of the other guys, but Jon-Eric Sullivan's somebody who has a lot of the same qualities that Brian Gutekunst had when the Packers elevated him to succeed Ted Thompson. And, what they were looking for in a GM was a dyed-in-the-wool scout. They have a guy named Brandon Shore who they elevated from cap guy into a role and I know Tony Pastore's in LA, right, Rich? Mm-hmm. Mike Disner in Detroit, like this three-headed monster where you have a cap/analytics/operations guy over here, a general manager as a scout, and a coach all reporting to the owner. So Brandon Shore in that role, in the cap operations analytics role. You have Jon-Eric Sullivan as kind of the head scout GM, and then you're going to have the coach reporting to the owner. So that's the way the whole thing played out. And I know that was a little long-winded, but that's the whole story as I know it.
So then let's get to, what does John Harbaugh want? Has he, in your reporting, Albert Breer, communicated this to anyone that has kicked a tire on him? Has he told people, beat it, I'm not interested when I do start talking the next week? Like, what has he communicated to franchises that can give a fan base a little bit of hope, if that's who they're looking for, or to move on to somebody else? Albert, what do you got?
I'm not aware of any direct communication between John Harbaugh and any organization. Doesn't mean it hasn't happened.
Sure.
Because back channeling happens all the time,
but he's allowed to do it. I mean, he's gone. You know what I mean? Like, he can do it.
He can. And here's the thing: is like, if he says, like, I'll put it this way to you. So his agent's a guy named Brian Harlan. If you're John Harbaugh and you tell Brian Harlan, okay, you know what? I was there 18 years. I want to take a few days and just decompress and think about things. Isn't it the agent's job to, at that point, to kind of go check out the landscape and see what's out there?
Heck yeah. I would want my agent to do that, and I'd also tell my agent, while I take a break, and the agent, John, we have an opportunity to go here, but they have a general manager. Who do you have in mind? Or they already have talked about this and, over dinner or whatever over the years, that if I ever go somewhere else, this is the guy I'd want. I mean, that's the point. You know what I mean? Like, it's gone viral. You saw that, I'm sure, Jackson Dart, the lip readers, with him on the sideline prior or during the game last night.
I think
yeah. Like, he's like, somebody asked him, who's coming to the Giants to be your coach? And he says, Harbaugh, Stefanski, but I don't know. You could absolutely read those lips. So, but they've got a GM there, right?
Yep.
And I don't know if that would be a fit just because of that, unless he does love Joe Schoen. I don't know. The question is, what does he want? What does he want?
Just knowing what I know about John,
sure,
I'd say alignment. I think that's really important to him.
Meaning what? What does that mean?
Meaning, like, what he experienced in Baltimore and what Ozzie Newsome set up for him and what he had in an owner in Steve Bisciotti. And we've both been around Steve, right? Like, I think Steve's a pretty good guy to work for. Like, he has standards. He has an idea of the way he wants his program to be. But he also is going to let everybody do their jobs, like, he's not an overlord at all, so, like, I think, the like, having some level of certainty in ownership is going to be important to him. Here's the other thing. There's been a lot of talk over the last few days, right, about what really happened in Baltimore. Here's what I would tell you that I know. Okay. So John Harbaugh is a player's coach. I 100%, I would say that with 100% certainty, because I've heard stories from his best players about how he listens to them, how he adjusts schemes for them, how he's an ideas guy. You talk to the guys who've been through there, Wink Martindale, Jesse Minter, Mike McDonald on the offensive side, guys like Greg Roman and Todd Monken. Like, he has his hands in everything. He's pushing everything forward. And, like, he just has an idea of what he wants things to look like. He wants everybody to innovate. He wants everybody to be working at his pace. And I think the problem there the last couple of years may not have been so much like the players are out on him as like, can I push this team to be what I need it to be to run my program the way I want to run it? And I think Jim's the same way, right? Like, I think Jim is a player's coach too. I think Jim requires a certain type of player though, like there's a type of player who can play for Jim Harbaugh. And I think when he got to the Chargers, he found it. Justin Herbert, Joe Alt, Rashawn Slater, Derwin James is like one of his favorite players ever.
Yep.
And those guys set the pace for him. So I think having a place where he can look at it and say, I can line it up the way I want to run it, And I think for him, that's not only going to include research about the general manager and the owner. I think it's going to include research on the players on hand. Like, so does he look at the Giants and say, I can get Malik Neighbors and Abdul Carter and Brian Burns and Dexter Lawrence and Jackson Dart, the guys that are going to be there. Can I push them the way I need to push them? And can I get them to be the torchbearers for what I'm trying to build? I think that's part of the equation for John.
Well, then what happened in Baltimore where he wasn't able to push the same guys anymore? You know what I mean? Like that's a fair follow-up here, Albert, where it's just...
And I do think
it's
that
18 years. It's not like all of it. There are some guys there that have been there for years, and that's the quarterback is clearly one of them. Was there something going on between the two of those guys?
He loves the quarterback. Like
he says that anybody will listen. Sure.
Hey, if he winds up in Miami, and all of a sudden Lamar Jackson is available for trade, I'm not going to do the Brian Windhorst thing here, but and I love Windy, but I think he'd be interested, I think would he have loved Lamar to have been there more in the offseason? Absolutely. And that's part of what I'm talking about as far as torchbearers go, right? Like, I think like for them to run the program they wanted to run, you really do need like a high level of buy-in. And again, like I just think for most of John Harbaugh's 18 years, he had that, you can go through the names, Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, more recently, guys like CJ Mosley, Eric Weddle, there were guys that were Anquan Bolden, like you knew what a Raven was, and so like, I think he would be looking for that same type of player. And they have a really good roster. I don't know that they had that percentage of guys that were that way, the same way they might have a couple of years ago.
All right, before I let you go, Albert Breer, I throw open the wild card weekend floor to you. What leaps out at you? Storylines, headlines.
It's wide ass open, Rich.
Yeah, yeah. It is, isn't it?
I mean, no Lamar Jackson, no Joe Burrow, no Patrick Mahomes.
Yep.
Right. So, I mean, in the AFC, this is the first time I can remember where you could legitimately look at one conference's bracket. Would it surprise you if the 3 wildcard teams advanced?
I was saying to Chris the other day on our Overreaction Monday pod that all 6 road teams could possibly win.
The Panthers would be, the Panthers are home. Yeah.
Right. That the Rams, Niners, Packers.
Yeah, all 6 could.
Chargers, Bills, Texans win. Now, that's entirely possible, which is what made having a bye week this year maybe more important than rest or getting one rung up the ladder ahead of everyone else. Like, you are avoiding this fray. Obviously, 6 road wins would be really off the charts, but this season has been. And in terms of what you just said of who's not in the AFC playoffs, that's why everybody's looking at Josh Allen and say, okay, you're now on the clock, but his hands are full. We had Liam Cohen on as our first guest of the week on Monday. He has absolutely dialed in this team over the last 2 months to the point where they are 100% a threat to make it to Santa Clara and win it all. They really are, Albert.
Yeah, and I think it's a good example of how we all make early judgments and then become married to those judgments on quarterbacks too. Because I think Trevor Lawrence has steadily gotten better over the course of the year, right? Like, so you look at them, opportunistic defense under Anthony Campanelli, they've taken the ball away at an incredible rate, right? They're really solid on the lines of scrimmage. They've got, skill players now, like, Brian Thomas hasn't been what they thought they'd be. Travis Hunter's hurt. But like, look at the amount of guys in that roster that are having career years. Josh Hines-Allen's having a great year. Parker Washington has been huge down the stretch.
Devin Lloyd, keep going.
Devin Lloyd's had a career year. Travis Etienne looks like a real weapon. And then you have the quarterback. And like, I think it's a great example of, how we make these judgments on these guys and we become married to them. And then we're not willing to move off of them. Like, a guy can't grow, And I sort of look at it like, Baker Mayfield, when he got in a better situation, really took off, or Sam Darnold gets in better situations and we see who he can be. I think we're sort of seeing that with Trevor now. And the wild card with Trevor to me is he actually does have a lot of big game experience. And we have seen him on big stages. And he's generally played really well, right? Like now a big piece of that was in college, but he came back from 27 down in his second year in the NFL and beat the Chargers in the wild card round. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, they put up a pretty good fight the next week against the Chiefs too, right? In the divisional round. So I think Trevor and his big game experience makes them dangerous. I think I could see the Chargers going into New England and winning. I could see the Bills going to Jacksonville winning. Like you said, I could see it the other way. Like, it's just, there's so much, like, the whole thing is wide open.
Exciting.
And that does, and you're right. Like, I think that's a great point you bring up. Like, how much pressure is there on the Bills people now? Because Josh Allen is now in a playoff bracket where there's no Mahomes hurdle that they have to clear. It does put more pressure on those guys too, because it's kind of like one of those, if not now, then when types of questions.
So then let me finish up in the 2 minutes I have left with you. Anybody coaching for their jobs this weekend, based on what we've seen this past week, where the unpredictable happened so many times, Albert?
So there are two I would just kind of throw out there. Like, it's just questions. I don't think either of these guys are getting fired.
Right.
But like, you heard some stuff. Could Mike Tomlin go to TV for a year?
Right.
And I think, like, I've taken you through this before. Older players, Rodgers, Hayward, Watt, Ramsey, like, they've got a bunch of guys where if those guys all walk away at once, and I don't think TJ will, but the other guys all could, right? If, like, now you're talking about going through a serious retooling, could Mike Tomlin look at that and say, this is the natural point for me to step away? I don't want to go through a 3 or 4 year rebuild, or maybe I can go into TV for a year and then a year from now walk into a situation that's more ready-made. I guess that's possible. I don't think it's likely, but I guess that would be possible still. And then there's Matt LaFleur, where there's a new team president there in Ed Policy who took over for Mark Murphy in the summer. He was internal, so he does know Matt LaFleur very well, but they've got a contract negotiation coming up. And so, if that contract negotiation isn't in a great place right after the season, if you're Matt Ryan in Atlanta, who, by the way, Matt LaFleur was his position coach when they went to the Super Bowl, do you pick up the phone and make a phone call and say, like, hey, is he at all available? If you're Jon-Eric Sullivan and you just got to Miami and you don't get John Harbaugh, do you pick up the phone and say, look, like, we're willing to go a certain distance to get this guy. Are you willing to listen? That's the other one where, just because of the contract situation, I don't think they're unhappy with him, but because of the contract situation, they could get some calls from some teams where it's like, is this guy available? And it'd be interesting to see what the result was.
And of course, he could beat the Bears and go on a run. Which brings full circle that this is wide ass open, as Albert Breer said right here on Disney Plus. How dare you? All right, man.
I'm sorry. Are there new rules now?
Right. It's okay. Good to see you, bud. Thanks again, man.
All right. Thanks, Rich.
Albert Breer, everybody. Follow him on every social you can. And, of course, read his material in Sports Illustrated, the MMQB.
Hey, you made it all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Check us out every single day streaming live on Disney Plus and the ESPN app 12 to 3 Eastern.